haven't done that. Well, I am an anthropologist, but they disowned me. I was actually actively disaffiliated from the anthropology department at Stanford, and I'll tell you why, and I have it in writing. Bureaucratic hygiene. Bureaucratic hygiene was the reason I was excluded. I think it's relevant to what we're doing tonight, actually, that it didn't fit. This is fascinating, it's rather wonderful. What I'm going to do is just give you some reactions to what I've been watching. It's a bunch of words that make me think of some of the things that I've been trying to do, and I'm learning from your own efforts. To begin with just some background. It goes back a little way for me to a book I did, gosh, when I was actually supposed to be doing my PhD. It was a book called Experiencing the Past. And my intention in the book was to raise the issue precisely of experience, and absolutely, you've been addressing that tonight. I would connect it to a broader field, which I think is implicit in what we've been hearing, watching, talking about, which is aesthetics. But I don't mean, artsy-fartsy stuff. The aesthetic is the combination of thinking, sensing, feeling, evaluating. It's a cognitive process as well as one that is, of course, rooted in our senses. That's what we're exploring the aesthetic. Experience in the past as well for me was precisely, in my own project, an exercise in science studies. What is it that we're doing when we're experiencing the past and working on it? So absolutely, practice, the process. Well, what is it? What is archaeology? And my line was, archaeology is what archaeologists do. And in that respect, the doing is, of interest. Rather than go for definitions, I was more interested in watching what people were doing and thinking, how might we do it better? Or a different way? To what end? Because ultimately what we share with our disciplinary colleagues, but also beyond that, is something which is it's something that's been around for 200 years and more. And it's an archaeological sensibility. It is historically specific. We can see it emerging in the 18th century. And what is it about? We work on what remains. We work on what remains. Now, we can make it broader when we're looking at the performance of the past, absolutely. But if you want to keep that archaeological component, for me, working on what remains will do. Okay, so, experience in the past led to a visit from some performers, a company called Breathgrove. Specifically, the two artistic directors of that company came to visit me and said, we kind of think your book is interesting. We do site-specific theatre. The two guys were Cliff McLucas and Mike Pearson. I'm still working with Mike. I was working with Cliff, but he died. And they had a very fascinating combination of approaches to, as I say, what they were doing, which was site-specific theatre. Mike is a physical performer. He's in the tradition, a long tradition, 20th century tradition, of physical performance that brings in Artaud, Grotowski, theatre of cruelty, physical performance, street theatre. For Mike, things kind of begin and end with the solar plexus. And Mike is a very imposing figure in all sorts of ways. He's subtle and such, but it's very much about him. Presence is a big deal with Mike. Cliff was almost the diametric opposite. Cliff was an architect. Whereas Mike worked from here out, Cliff arranged spaces. Cliff was a scenographer. Cliff, a dramaturg. Mike was improvisation. The two of them put together, extraordinary. An extraordinarily powerful combination. And in the middle of it all, they were interested in working on what remains. And that's why I got sucked into this world that led to something we call theatre archaeology, which, simple definition, the rearticulation of fragments of the past as a real-time event. And it kind of summarizes archaeology, but goes much further. And I'd love to think that there were components of that. I'm seeing components of what I would call theatre archaeology in what you're doing here now. Other components that I've loved, as we all do, I think, working, yes, with scientists, and I do, and it's part of our world. But yes, scientists are performers too, even if they only wear white coats. But also the world of the arts, and we've already raised questions about quite what the status of the arts are. And we can connect it, of course, to issues of aesthetics, but also cultural politics, the art market, and such. But I think it's just a fascinating field where questions can be raised to kind of, here's something I think we're also exploring, a third space. It's another space which gives us freedom to try stuff out. A temporary autonomous zone in Hacking Bay's notion of, pirate politics. So third spaces, the arts maybe. And there I've just been so blessed to work with typically not people in archaeology. When you're asking an audience, absolutely, that's correct. It's important to do that, but really sometimes it's just to ask the question, who's your audience? To be mindful of your audience is frankly more important than thinking I'm targeting this kind of person. Just be mindful of who they are. And so I've tended to work with Mike and Cliff, and we did works of site-specific theatre, where we put stuff on in a place, sensitive to place, in the terms of re-articulating fragments of the past as real-time event. But also other kinds of artwork as artists. And so I say, blessed to work with Lynn Hirschman, who's local, who's very interested in the mediation of self-identity, the representation, not just mediation, representation of self and identity, more of that in a second. Ceramics people, working with clay, which is a different order of performance. Again, engagement, modes of engagement with stuff we're interested in. And that's what we're doing here now. Very mindful of those different modes of engagement. Not just assuming there's one way, but let's explore. And so, ceramicist, yeah, and most recently, guys who do cars up. They remodel cars, they hot rod them, or they restore them, and they collect them and drive them. Old cars or new cars, but driving as performance and modification of that experience. It's quite a fascinating world. And even visual artists, Paul Noble has become a great collaborator, and his work is just extraordinary. And again, I would say, quite archaeological in working in a particular medium on what's left. Okay, so that's kind of a quick background and sets up a few headings that I would just put in front of you. What I kind of want to do is just say, hey, this is not a ghetto. We actually have the stage, to use the metaphor. And the guys out there who are doing their academic stuff, they're in the ghetto. They're the ones who are in the narrow field. We're the ones who are much broader. Whether that's outreach, I don't think of course we can take that in, or whether it's just being mindful, again, use that word, mindful of what we do. Okay, so what's one of the big frames within which we're in? It's rhetoric. It's an old field. It's a classical field and a classicism. It's the field of presenting an argument. But it's a forensic field. You're making a case. You're advocating. You're putting things in front of people. What are the components of that? We have, there are many, but in the Latin terms, there's narratio. You tell a case. You tell the story. Narration. But narration is not, narrative is not storytelling. Storytelling is the mobilization of narrative. Because rhetoric is performance. It's a theory of performance. Narratio, elocutio is the delivery. Gesture, voice, staging, and then things like dispositio. How do you lay things out? Whether you put this first, flashback, or whether you flash forward.